The person you think you are isn't there. Right now, as you're reading this, you feel like you're one continuous person who has existed from birth until now. You have memories stretching back years, a sense of being the same you who experienced childhood, made decisions yesterday, and will wake up tomorrow. You feel like a persistent, continuous self moving through time. But you're wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. The you that you think exists, the continuous, persistent identity that seems so obvious, so undeniable, is a complete illusion. There is no you. There never has been. There never will be. What you call yourself is actually a constantly changing collection of processes, with no central core, no persistent essence, no continuous identity that bridges different moments in time. You are not one person experiencing many moments. You are many different momentary patterns of information, each containing the illusion of being connected to all the others. This isn't philosophy or speculation. This is what happens when you actually look at what a person is made of, how identity works, and what it means to persist through time. And when you see the truth about personal identity, it becomes clear that everything you believe about yourself, your life story, and your continuous existence is fundamentally mistaken. Let me show you just how complete this illusion is, and why it should utterly destroy your sense of being a persistent self moving through a linear existence. Start with something everyone thinks they understand: your body. You feel like you inhabit the same physical body you've always had. Sure, it's changed over time. You've grown, aged, gained, or lost weight, but it feels like the same body, right? The same flesh and blood that's been yours since birth. Wrong. Your body is not the same body. Not even close. Every atom in your body gets replaced on a regular cycle. The cells in your stomach lining replace themselves every few days. Your skin cells are completely new every few weeks. Your blood cells are replaced every few months. Your bone cells turn over every few years. Within about 7 years, essentially every atom that currently makes up your body will be gone, replaced by completely different atoms. The carbon in your muscles will be carbon that was recently part of a plant, or floating in the atmosphere, or locked in a rock. The hydrogen in your DNA will be hydrogen that was recently in the ocean, or in another person's body, or in a cloud. Your body is more like a river than a thing. The water in a river is constantly changing. New water flows in, old water flows out, but we call it the same river. Your body is the same way. New atoms flow in from food and air. Old atoms flow out through waste and exhalation. The pattern persists, but the material is completely different from moment to moment. So the body you think of as yours is actually a temporary arrangement of atoms that happen to be passing through the pattern you call your body at this particular moment. Those atoms don't belong to you, they're just visiting. They've been part of countless other patterns before, and they'll be part of countless other patterns after. But maybe your identity doesn't depend on having the same atoms. Maybe it depends on having the same brain, the same neurons, the same neural connections that store your memories and personality. Surely that's what makes you you, right? Wrong again. Your brain is also completely replaced over time. Neurons die and are replaced. Neural connections are constantly being rewired. The physical structure of your brain is dramatically different today than it was 10 years ago. Not only are the atoms different, the very architecture is different. Your memories aren't stored in particular physical locations like files on a hard drive. They're patterns of connection strength between neurons, and those patterns are constantly changing. Every time you remember something, you actually change the memory. The act of remembering reconstructs the memory from fragments, and the reconstructed version becomes the new version stored in your brain. So, not only is the physical structure of your brain constantly changing, but the memories and experiences you think define your continuous identity are also constantly being rewritten. You don't have access to your actual past experiences. You only have access to your current brain's reconstruction of what it thinks those experiences were like. The person who experienced your 5th birthday party is gone. The brain that encoded that memory has been completely replaced. The memory of that birthday has been reconstructed and rewritten dozens of times since then. What you remember as your 5th birthday is actually your current brain's best guess about what your previous brain patterns might have experienced, based on information that has been corrupted and edited through countless rounds of recall and reconstruction. But even if your memories were perfectly preserved, even if the physical structure of your brain never changed, you still wouldn't be the same person from moment to moment. Because identity isn't just about having the same memories or the same brain. It's about being a continuous stream of consciousness, a unified experience that persists through time. And that's where the illusion becomes most obvious, because consciousness isn't continuous. It's not a stream. It's a series of discrete moments of awareness, each arising independently, with no connecting thread between them. Every night you lose consciousness completely. When you sleep deeply, there is no experience, no awareness, no sense of self. The person who went to sleep is effectively gone. In the morning, a new pattern of consciousness arises, containing memories that make it feel connected to the person who went to sleep, but there's no actual continuity of experience. Even during waking consciousness, your sense of continuous awareness is an illusion created by memory. You don't actually experience a smooth flow of consciousness. You experience discrete moments of awareness, and your brain creates the illusion of continuity by connecting each moment to memories of previous moments. But those connections are manufactured after the fact. Each moment of consciousness contains the feeling of being connected to previous moments, but this feeling is just information processed by your current brain state. There's no actual thread of continuity running through different conscious moments. There are just separate moments of awareness, each containing the illusion of being part of a continuous experience. So the continuous self that seems so obvious is actually a story your brain tells itself. Each moment of consciousness contains a narrative about being connected to previous moments, but this narrative is just another piece of information being processed, no different from your perception of colors or sounds. You are not experiencing being a continuous self. You are experiencing the feeling of continuity and mistaking that feeling for actual persistence through time. But feelings can be manufactured by brain processes without corresponding to anything real in the world. This becomes even more obvious when you consider split-brain patients, people who have had the connection between the left and right hemispheres of their brain severed to treat severe epilepsy. After this surgery, these patients effectively have two separate streams of consciousness in the same brain. The left hemisphere can speak and report its experiences verbally. The right hemisphere cannot speak but can respond through actions. When researchers present information to only one hemisphere, that hemisphere responds as if the other hemisphere doesn't exist. Each hemisphere seems to have its own separate sense of identity, its own stream of consciousness, its own sense of being a continuous self. Which one is the real person? Before the surgery, there was one stream of consciousness. After the surgery, there are two. Did the original person get duplicated? Did they get split in half? Did one stream continue the original identity while the other became a new person? None of these questions have meaningful answers because they're based on the false assumption that there was ever a unified, persistent self to begin with. What split-brain patients reveal is that the sense of being a unified self is created by brain processes that integrate different streams of information. When those integrative processes are damaged, multiple separate senses of self can exist in the same brain. This suggests that your normal sense of being one unified person is also created by integrative brain processes. You're not actually one person. You're a collection of different mental processes, perception, memory, language, emotion, planning, that get temporarily bound together into the feeling of being a unified self. But this binding is imperfect and constantly shifting. Different aspects of your personality can be in conflict. You can have conversations between different parts of yourself. You can change your mind, have mixed feelings, experience internal disagreement. These aren't signs of psychological complexity in a unified person. They're signs that there is no unified person, just multiple processes creating the temporary illusion of unity. During meditation, people sometimes experience the dissolution of the sense of self. The feeling of being a separate, continuous person fades away, and awareness becomes more like an open space in which experiences arise and pass away. This isn't a mystical experience. It's what happens when the brain processes that normally create the sense of unified identity become quieter. What these experiences reveal is that the sense of self is optional. It's not a fundamental feature of consciousness. It's something the brain does, not something the brain detects. When the brain stops doing it, there can still be consciousness and awareness, but no sense of being a particular person having that consciousness. But let's go even deeper. Even if you could maintain some kind of continuity of consciousness, even if your brain never changed, even if your memories were perfect, you still wouldn't be the same person from moment to moment, because the very notion of sameness breaks down when you look at it closely. This is the ancient ship of Theseus paradox, but applied to personal identity. If a ship has all its parts gradually replaced, is it still the same ship? If you have all your atoms replaced, all your brain cells replaced, all your memories reconstructed, are you still the same person? The intuitive answer is yes. As long as the changes are gradual, identity persists. But this intuition is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what identity means. Identity requires something that persists unchanged through time. But everything about you is constantly changing. Your atoms, your cells, your neural connections, your memories, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your goals, all of it is in constant flux. You might argue that there's a pattern that persists even while the material changes. Like a wave in the ocean, the water is always different, but the wave maintains its shape and movement. But waves are processes, not things. A wave doesn't have identity in any meaningful sense. It's just a temporary disturbance in an underlying medium. That's what you are. Not a thing with persistent identity, but a temporary process, a pattern of activity in the underlying quantum foam of reality. The pattern seems to persist for a while, but it's constantly changing, and eventually it dissipates completely. Even the idea that there's a pattern that persists is questionable. When you compare yourself now to yourself from 10 years ago, are you really the same pattern? Your interests have changed, your knowledge has changed, your personality has evolved, your goals are different, your values may have shifted, your ways of thinking and responding have been modified by countless experiences. In what meaningful sense are you the same pattern? You share some information with that previous person, some memories, some learned behaviors, some ingrained habits. But you also share information with millions of other people. You share most of your DNA with every other human. You share atoms with every living thing on Earth. You share quantum fields with the entire universe. The boundaries of what you consider to be you are completely arbitrary. You could just as easily identify with your family, your community, your species, or all of life on Earth. The sense that there's a particular boundary that defines where you end and the rest of the world begins is just another constructed feeling, no more real than the feeling of continuity through time. From a physical perspective, you are not separate from your environment. You are constantly exchanging matter and energy with the world around you. The molecules you exhale become part of plants. The food you eat becomes part of your body. The heat you radiate becomes part of the thermal environment. You are not a discrete object in the world. You are part of the continuous process that is the world. From an information perspective, most of your thoughts are not original to you. Language, concepts, ideas, values, beliefs, you learned all of this from your cultural environment. Your thoughts are primarily recombinations of information you absorb from other people. The you that thinks your thoughts is largely a collection of other people's mental patterns that have been temporarily assembled in your brain. Even your sense of free will and agency, the feeling that you are the author of your thoughts and decisions, is manufactured by brain processes after the fact. Neuroscience shows that decisions are initiated by unconscious processes before you become aware of having made the decision. What you experience as deciding is actually your consciousness taking credit for decisions that were already made by unconscious neural activity. So not only are you not a persistent self, you're also not the author of your own thoughts and actions. The decisions you think you're making are actually being made by unconscious processes you have no access to and no control over. The you that seems to be in charge is just a story your brain tells about events that are already happening. But here's the deepest level of the illusion. Even the awareness that seems to be observing all of this, the consciousness that feels like it's reading these words, understanding these ideas, having this experience, even that might not be unified or persistent. What if consciousness is also just a collection of separate processes? What if there's no central observer, no unified awareness, no single stream of consciousness experiencing your life? What if there are just multiple streams of information processing, some of which create the feeling of being a unified observer? This would explain why you can be consciously thinking about one thing while unconsciously processing dozens of other streams of sensory information, memory retrieval, emotional responses, and motor planning. You feel like one consciousness managing all of this, but maybe it's actually multiple streams of processing with no central manager. The stream that creates language and narrative, the one that's currently processing these words, might feel like it's the real you because it's the one that can report on its experience verbally. But it's just one process among many, no more central or important than the processes managing your heartbeat, your balance, or your visual processing. When you say, I think, or I feel, or I remember, what you really mean is thinking is happening, feeling is happening, remembering is happening. But there's no evidence for an I that's separate from these processes. The I is just another piece of information being processed, another story being told by the narrative-generating systems in your brain. So what are you, really? You are not a person. You are not a self. You are not a continuous identity persisting through time. You are a temporary arrangement of processes creating the illusion of personhood, selfhood, and continuity. You are what it feels like when the universe briefly organizes itself into patterns complex enough to generate the experience of being someone. But there is no someone there. There's just the experience of someoneness arising and passing away moment by moment. The you reading this sentence is not the same you that read the previous sentence. Each moment of reading is a separate event, experienced by a separate momentary arrangement of processes, with no actual connection to previous moments except the information that creates the feeling of connection. You will not read the next sentence. A different momentary pattern sharing some information with the current pattern will have the experience of reading the next sentence and will feel like it's the continuation of you reading this sentence. But it will be a different event happening to a different arrangement of processes. Your birth was not the beginning of you because there is no you to have a beginning. Your death will not be the end of you because there is no you to have an end. Birth and death are just changes in the configuration of matter and energy. The story of your life, your memories, experiences, relationships, achievements is not the story of a persistent person moving through time. It's a collection of separate events, each experienced by different momentary arrangements of matter and consciousness, with no connecting thread except information that creates the illusion of connection. You are not someone having an experience. You are the experience itself, a temporary flowering of consciousness in an otherwise unconscious universe, a brief moment when matter becomes aware of itself and mistakes its temporary organization for permanent identity. The person you think you are isn't there. But the experience of being that person, the thoughts, feelings, memories, and sensations that create the illusion of personhood, that experience is real, vivid, and extraordinary, even though there's no one there to have it.